أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today we have another very interesting and very educating lesson on the sayings of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam. As you know, every Saturday we go over one little paragraph in Malfuzat. We try to talk about it, and we also try to talk about the history of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam. So I'll just go over that quickly today. So, as you know, we learned about the sayings of the Promised wasalam, and we are on lesson 3 of this series. We started a series on Malfuzat, and Malfuzat, as you know, are recollections, things which the companions of the Promised wasalam have written down and compiled into these books of Malfuzats, the sayings and discourses of the promised Messiah Islam. So we are on volume 1. So very big book, and a few volumes which we are going to cover, but we start with volume 1. And in today's lesson, we'll learn about 1895 and an account of Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib Razillahu Anhu. And also continuing from last lesson where we talked about the first jalsa, we're going to talk about the second jalsa, which was known as the big jalsa, and we'll understand why it was called the big jalsa. So to begin with, we'll read the extract in 1895, and respected Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib Razillahu Anhu writes, even in 1895, when I would visit the promised Messiah alayhi salam, in my eagerness, I would record his holy words on a piece of paper and take them to Lahore, where I would read them out to Ahmadi friends in our weekly meetings. I present here some of my recollections from that time to readers in those days. Since exact dates were not recorded, I put forth all of these words undated. So this was the first bit of writing which is done under the heading of 1895 in Malfuzat, and we can learn so much from this. During that time, as we hear and as we see here, the companions would write down what the Promised Messiah alayhi salam would say and then convey it to other people. And I remember my time during when I was in Africa, would always record what beloved Huzur would say in his sermon, and then would go to a very remote village and convey those words to these people living in this village who didn't have MTA, who didn't have radio or any form of communication in that way that we have here, which we are so lucky to have. And in the same way, during the Prophet Prophet's time, this is how messages would be conveyed. They would send like messengers to different places to tell others what the Prophet ﷺ would say. And this is exactly during the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where the very same thing happened. And so there are two benefits to this. Firstly, the exact words are being written down. And secondly, other people can benefit from these teachings. And so in the same way, we must also take benefit. We have the great blessing and the opportunity to be listening to beloved Huzur and understanding what he says. So in the same way, we must take the knowledge from beloved Huzur, what we learn, and also convey it at the same time. And knowledge is supposed to be spread, is supposed to be given to everyone. So we must also continue in this manner. Any knowledge you get, especially directly from the Khulafa, from the Promised books, try learn it and give it to other people as well around you. In that way, that knowledge will be embedded in your mind, and also you can also act upon those words too. So this is just one lesson we can learn from the way Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib Razillahu Anhu would act around the Prophet Sallallahu. He would really want to absorb everything and all the awe of the Prophet Sallallahu and all his words and all his teachings. Really try to make him into the man that he became. So then now we're going to go into the next bit and learn about the big jalsa, and knowing the history of this is very important. And so, like I said in the first lesson, in the lesson before, we learned about the first Jalsa Salana, and now we'll learn about the second one. And so the Jalsa Salana of 1892 became known as the Big Jalsa among those attending. Tarikh Ahmediyyat paints how this Jalsa was held next to the pond in Qadian. The stage was built from the mud collected from in and around the pond. The promised Messiah ﷺ was sat upon the raised platform on which carpet had been laid. Jamaat members were seated around him on the floor. So this paints a very humble image of the beginning times of our Jamaat. And this is only the second Jalsa Salana which we are talking about. And it's so interesting to note how the stage was made and how important the stage is of Jalsa Salana. And you see how much effort we put in to building the stage now. But it's so humbling to know how the very first the stages were made in the beginning from the mud of the pond in Qadian. And so that's so amazing to note. And so we must always remember the very building blocks of our Jamaat, and it's so important to know the history. And so now we'll just go through what happened in the days of that Jalsa Salana. So the program in 1892, on the Tuesday, the 27th of December, the first speech was delivered by Hazrat Maulana Nuruddin Sahib Razillahu Anhu, the first Khalifa of the Promised Messiah, and that was on the death of Jesus. Thereafter, Hazrat Sayyid Hamid Shah Sahib Razillahu Anhu recited a qasida before the audience. Then the Promised Messiah ﷺ delivered a powerful lecture regarding a section of his book, Doze Maram, that dealt with angels. Muslim clerics had raised objections against it. The speech had a profound effect upon those present. The Promised Messiah ﷺ later also conversed with his companions after Zuhr and Asr prayers. The Promised Messiah ﷺ later also conversed with his companions. And then on the second day, the Wednesday, 28th December, this is where the Shura was also taking place. On this day, a Majlis Shura was held to discuss plans for tabligh across Europe and America. Approximately 40 prominent companions contributed and presented their ideas. The gathering decided to create a detailed leaflet portraying the beautiful teachings of Islam and distribute it for free in Europe and America. Counsel was also taken on building a press in Qadian. A list of those companions was also recorded who would contribute to this project. Another proposal was concerning the initiation of a newspaper that would aid in spreading the teachings of Islam Ahmediyyat. Maulana Sayyid Muhammad Asan Sahib Amrohi Razillahu Anhu was given the responsibility to promote this proposal across India and Punjab. The aims and purpose of Jalsa Salana was discussed by Majlis Shura, and its organization was given structure. A committee was proposed who would take care of arranging Jalsa Salana. The proposal presented Hazrat Maulana Nuruddin Sahib Razillahu Anhu as the in charge. And then the Shura finally concluded with prayers. And this is all recorded in Tarikh Ahmadiyya Volume 1, page 442 to 443. And so this is why this Jalsa Salana was really known as the Big Jalsa Salana, because the Jamaat felt that we could really move forward now. We can really start looking not just in Qadian in India, but across the world and the big parts of the country of Europe and America. And so we really understand now how important Jalsa Salana was. And if we just look at this saying and this prophecy of the Promised Islam, that they will come from every path, that people from all over the world will come into this Jamaat of the Promised Messiah Islam, this divine the community. And as we know, on the first Jalsa Salana, we learned this in the last lesson, that there were only 75 people. But during the course of the lifetime of the Promised Islam, this number grew as more and more people visited Qadian, especially during the Jalsa days. The final Jalsa Salana during the lifetime of the Prophet Islam was attended by 3,000 people, a number which continues to grow till this day. Um, and all we can say is Alhamdulillah, all praise belongs to Allah for a Jamaat which started on such basic and humble building blocks. And we see how in such a small time, in just over 100 years, how much the Jamaat has excelled and how much it has grown. And this prophecy of they will come to you from every path is very prominent, and it's very important for us to understand today. And this again shows the truthfulness of the promised Messiah. And we must always remember why the Prophet ﷺ came and the reason he held events like Jalsa Salana. And this is such an important point that is mentioned here, that those who visited Qadian, especially in the days of Jalsa Salana, would be those people who accepted the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why Jalsa Salana is such an important event in our calendar, of inviting our friends, our contacts, those people who are outside of the Jamaat that want to understand what the Jamaat is. And this is the very best way to show them, is by practically displaying what the Jamaat has to offer to the world. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said this, that I have come to strengthen people in their faith. And the actions is what people see, and that's what they take in to strengthen their faith. And this is why the big Jalsa Salana was such an important event, and it was pivotal in the Jamaat's history. And so that's why we need to really understand the history of the Jamaat, and we need to learn more and more about the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why we are learning about Malfuzat, about the sayings and the incidents of the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we've learned about Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Sahib, and we have also learned about the big Jalsa Salana in this lesson. I hope and pray that you took some sort of benefit. May Allah always increase our knowledge and increase our understanding of the Ahmadiyyat of Islam, and increase our love for Allah the Almighty and the Promised Messiah والسلام, and the Holy Prophet Muhammad وسلم. And may we always be remained attached to Khilafat and the Jamaat. Jazakumullah Sanzillah. Again, we'll continue this dars next week for another lesson on Malfuzat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.